Mike Craven, Dave Campbell's Texas Football Magazine. Remember, he took that long and winding road and tour through Texas to watch some, or at least cover and then digest and spit it back out to us, the football teams around this great state. One of the stories, and Mike, thank you very much for your time, old school versus new money inside TCU and Texas Tech's roster battle. And is there a right way, or is there just going to always be different ways?
I think we're going to find that out over the next couple of years. I think the thing with the transfer portal is how volatile it'll be. I think Florida State's become the poster child for this. When it hit in 2023, they were 13-0, probably should have made the college football playoff if their quarterback doesn't get injured. They went back to the well in 2024 and the wheels fell off early and everybody kind of got off the bus and they were 2-10 and one of the worst teams in the country. And I went to TCU and Tech in back-to-back days. And it just kind of struck me how different the teams were going into 2025. Like TCU's got an offensive coordinator for the third year, a defensive coordinator going into year two, only had at that time 11 or 12 transfers, most of them kind of not starters outside of wide receivers. Then you drive the 5 hours over to Lubbock and it's a new offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator, 4 new defensive linemen in the transfer portal, a whole new offensive line. And so some of it's what you can do. Tech had a lot of money, so they were able to go into that transfer portal and to get those big stars. But it does feel like those two teams took kind of different approaches, and we're going to see which one works out the best for them.
Do you think with Texas Tech, I mean, obviously there was quantity there, absolutely. But they really did drill down on production as well. They don't have too many guys that they went out that were which I think was Mike Norvell's problem, is he got a lot on potential. Oh, these guys, they didn't play at LSU or Bama, so we have a spot for them. They'll play here. And there's a reason they didn't. As were Tech's guys, if you look at what they did, almost all of them have a lot of skins on the wall.
Yeah, I mean, I love Texas Tech's transfer portal class. I think they added 6 or 7 starters on defense, probably 5 or 6 on offense, especially up front. I've said this before, Texas always had a really good 7-on-7 football team. No matter the coach, they usually can throw the ball around. They usually have good wide receivers. They're usually decent at a couple of spots defensively, but they just can't compete in the trenches. They haven't been good along the offensive line, especially in pass pro the last few years. They haven't been good along the defensive line. Tim DeRuyter got fired, but I don't know if Bill Belichick could have coached that defense much better. The personnel just wasn't very good. Both of those coaches going into year 4, I think Sonny's betting on continuity and knowing the roster and the development. And I think Joey McGuire had some funds at his disposal that Texas Tech never had before. And they said, well, if we can go get some guys that we wouldn't have gotten out of high school or that we couldn't have got otherwise, let's go splash and figure this out before rev share went around. But I think you're right. I think early on in the transfer portal, a lot of coaches fell into the trap of potential and getting those 5 stars, kind of like the Oakland Raiders with Al Davis, how they were always trying to take first-round draft picks later on after they hadn't worked. And that's kind of boom or bust. I think Tech is going more with proven commodities that they've seen play, that have played at that level, and they can plug and play because, they're all in on 2025. They need it to happen right now.
Mike, is anything short of a Big 12 title appearance by Texas Tech? Failure feels like such a strong word, but they're leaning into it, though, man. It'd be one thing if it was a bunch of people are saying, hey, they should be really good. And they're like, hey, we still got some warts, but they're not doing that. They're like, hell yeah, we expect to be good. So is it championship appearance or bust in your mind for what they've invested?
What I love most about playing basketball is the competition. I really just like being shifty, mastering hesitation moves, changing direction, building chemistry with new teammates. If you're not having fun while you're playing, there's no point in playing the game. You know what to do. Escape basics. Pair of Thieves quick dry underwear. It wicks away sweat and helps keep you dry. You looking forward to fishing season?
Yeah, I think so. The Vegas line came out a couple weeks ago and it was 8.5, and it feels like if they hit under, that's a huge disappointing season. These transfers that they got aren't going to be around for a couple of years. David Bailey, those kind of Lee Hunter, those guys aren't going to be around in 2026. This is a 1-year rental proposition for most of these transfer portal guys. And so it has to hit the ground running. They have a schedule that lines up pretty well. They like their new coordinator additions that they made. They feel good about their roster. You look around at the Big 12 and, they have to be the favorite. They spent the most money. They have the best roster. Now, I think, honestly, the catalyst for this is what SMU did. SMU spent a lot of money in the transfer portal going into their first year in the ACC. They make it to the championship game, the college football playoff, and you can see what it did for that program. I think Texas Tech saw that and is trying to make a similar splash. And, yeah, I think Joey McGuire would agree that if they don't end up in at least Arlington for the Big 12 championship, that he would consider it a failure.
Yeah, they've been winning, and they've closed pretty well with Joey, but there's that one or two games that are the hiccups that keeps you out of a Big 12 championship game. What are their weaknesses, you think, leading or coming out of spring football?
It's a great question. They have a lot of new faces. So to me, it's just the continuity. Like, how do you build a team? Like, for our whole lives, like, football has been kind of the outlier in team sports. Like, you can have a couple stars in basketball. Your pitching can be really good in baseball. Like, football is the ultimate team sport. And you've always been told that it takes a couple of years to build that continuity, to build a team, and to have the whole foxhole mentality. Well, this is a mercenary army in Lubbock. And if things go well early on, you probably keep them together. You start marching in the right direction, and you go on a roll. But what happens to Texas Tech if they lose a week 2 game or a week 3 game that you're not supposed to, or they're 2-2 after 4 games or 3-3 after 6? Like, are you able to keep that roster together? A roster that probably didn't grow up wanting to go to Texas Tech, that didn't go through the traditional recruiting, hasn't been there for a couple of years. So to me, that's kind of the weakness. That's the question mark. Is just how do you build a team that quickly in that way?
What do you think TCU did or did not add that they should have in the portal?
Well, I think they did add wide receivers, and that was a huge one for them. They lost Davion Williams, Jack Best, J.P. Richardson. Like, that was the position that was the biggest hole. And to be fair in this conversation, like, TCU went heavy on the transfer portal previously. Like, if you look over the last 2 classes, I think TCU has 36 new guys. Texas Tech has 37. But it's the type of transfers. Like, TCU is getting a lot of guys that have 2 or 3 years of eligibility, and it's almost old school recruiting just through the transfer portal. Whereas Tech is going for stars that have played, that are going to be there for 1 year. I think TCU did really well at the wide receiver position. I think the big question for the Horned Frogs is just the run game. They got Kavorian Barnes from UTSA, who was really good early on in his career, kind of like a Richard Reese, had a really big freshman year and then kind of faded, and some other guys took that role. Last year, it was kind of Josh Hoover bust offensively. And so if they improve their run game, it's probably the one question mark in the transfer. If we look back in December and they still can't run the football, I think the criticism would be that they could have done more in the transfer portal, maybe running back and offensive line.
I don't know about you, Mike, but I hate the fact that the Big 12 Texas schools don't all play each other. And in this year in particular, you got what Tech doesn't play Baylor, and I don't think they play TCU either, unless I'm mistaken on that. But I just feel like there's got to be a way to round robin these teams. It just feels like a real shame to not have them play, especially heading into a year like this when they all, save maybe Houston, expect to be ultra competitive.
Yeah, it's killing my business model for sure. Need those guys to play. Need the Southwest Conference to come back. Yeah, that's the crazy part to me of this whole deal. I mean, we could get into expansion and just kind of the SEC and Big Ten kind of taking over, and all those are bummers. But the biggest bummer to me is that we've just lost the regionality of this sport. Like, I grew up a Texas fan because my grandfather worked for the UT football team, and I knew guys that were from Tech families or from Baylor families, TCU, Texas A&M. Like, I don't know anybody who grew up a Kentucky fan or an Alabama fan or Georgia. There's nobody to talk trash to. And that's the whole point of sports, is to win something and then rub it in your friend's face. Like, that's to me, that's my favorite part of it. Like, I went to UTSA beat UT in the regional last night, and it's been more fun giving my Longhorn friends crap than it has been just like enjoying the win. And we've lost that in college football, and I think that's a bummer. I think that's a sad thing.
I was going to ask you about that. I didn't know when in the interview, but how about those? I mean, we just had the old coach on here just a few minutes ago and talking about that big win, but that was something else, man. I know that you've covered them for a long time.
Yeah, meat. First of all, but yeah, I think I could make a pretty easy argument that was the biggest moment in UTSA athletics history. The only other thing I can think of is maybe winning the first Conference USA championship there with Jeff Traylor. But not only to make a super regional, but to beat, Big Brother and the mothership, as it's called, if you're a UTSA fan, and to kind of get through that. They're 3-0 this season against Texas and do it in a convincing fashion. Like, it wasn't flukish. Like, they beat them pretty soundly. If they were able to get to Omaha, I've already looked up how long that drive is. I have not broke it to the wife yet that I may go. We have a newborn at home, and so I may be in the doghouse. But I'd probably have to figure out a way to get there if that was to happen.
You have to go, Mike.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You got to find a way.
Yeah.
Get a
I got a 4-month at home, 4-month-old at home that was born a little early, who's a little small, who needs some extra care. And I've been, if y'all can help me out figuring out a way to approach that and to be able to figure out a way to do that, I'm all ears.
Paul, you want to babysit?
Give us your wife's cell phone number. We'll ruin it for you.
She's in contract law, so she can argue. So you got to be prepared. I got to come up with a real argument here. I got to formulate something. Maybe make a dissertation or something.
My wife used to be a nanny, so.
There you go.
Yeah. I mean, she's not anymore, but she still, she
could be. She
still has the skills. I mean, we had a company barbecue the other night, and one of the bosses bought his newborn baby there, and she rolled right into it. So, I could throw it out there. So
riding a bike.
Yeah,
riding a bike.
Exactly. Mike, you also wrote about the SEC and Big Ten manifest destiny that they seem to have in their quest to kind of ruin college football for everybody else. What do you think that the other conferences can do outside of a unified message, or is that the thing? Is that it has to be the Big 12 and the ACC and everybody else with a unified message against those two?
Yeah, I think they're doing what they can. They don't have a lot of power. The SEC and the Big Ten have so many of the bargaining chips, and this thing's gone their direction for so long. What strikes me is it's just never enough for them, right? Like, they have all the power, they have all the money, they have all the access, and like one of their 3-loss teams doesn't make it in one year, and they're like, we have to change the whole system to fit into their priorities. And it's just, I don't know. It's like what I was talking about earlier, just the loss of regionality and just the consolidation of power into these two conferences is bad for the rest of the sport. Like I said this on Twitter, like the fact that Greg Sankey is good at his job, which is bad for everybody else, like, is part of the problem. There's just no centralized leadership, and that's allowed two groups to kind of take over like the mafia would, right? Like, two families have kind of taken over in the absence of any centralized power. College football has nobody to blame but themselves, though. I mean, they put their head in the sands for decades on end and hope that the system just worked out, and it didn't. They lost in court every single time that they've gone, and the SEC and Big Ten have taken over, and I just think it's bad for everybody else. But I think they have to go with the 5+11 model, even though that probably allows SEC and Big Ten even more teams. Just because if you would go for the automatic bid thing, where it's like 4 for the Big Ten, 4 for the SEC, and 2 for everybody else, you're just admitting that you're not peers with them, and there's no longer a Power 4. It's just like an Elite 2. So I don't think that there's a great solution for the Big 12 and the ACC, other than hopefully that their institutions kind of push all their chips into the table, get better, and go compete with these guys and keep it from being, AFL and NFL.
What was your take last week when the SEC had their media days and Sankey did kind of puff his chest out? And then they came back with, as the Big 12 was starting their spring meetings, with all these stats and all these, like, look at us, when everyone does because they get all the attention.
Yeah, and a lot of that is like a feedback loop, like a positive feedback loop. Like, if you, of course, your strength of schedule is going to be higher if everybody ranks your teams higher, and then you just beat each other, and then you can go like, well, look at our schedule. I just don't know when we lost the, like, what matters on, or what happens on the field matters the most. They talk about strength of schedule like that. Ole Miss lost to Kentucky at home. Like, Alabama lost to OU and Vanderbilt. Like, it's not like they're the only, if Alabama's 3 losses were like Georgia, Texas, and Ole Miss, then maybe they'd have an argument. I don't know. It just feels unfair to everybody else. And I think the Big Ten skates because they don't talk. Like, Petiti doesn't talk the way that Sankey does. And so the SEC gets all the hate. But the guaranteed auto bid thing, from my understanding, is mostly a Big Ten concoction because they want to have those playing games at the end of the season, and you're not going to do that unless you have guaranteed spots. So I think the SEC probably takes too many of the bullets for it, and the Big Ten's as culpable of that. I just fear that this thing is moving in a direction that you can't stop, and that's just the Big Ten, the SEC, taking their ball, making their own kind of sport, having their own playoff, and kind of leaving everybody else behind.
I brought this up. There was a text exchange I had with a college coach, and I asked him, he brought up, listen, the NCAA is business and the SEC is the bell cow. Of course, the Big Ten makes even more money. And I still cannot imagine. I'm not saying I can't imagine eventually a super league, but just because you are born into a conference and you're Vanderbilt or Mississippi State or Northwestern or whoever, does that mean you get to remain in that conference if they move forward for a national championship with other conferences waiting around?
I mean, I think that they would, just because they need food to eat, right? Like, if you don't have Rutgers, if you don't have Vanderbilt, if you don't have Maryland, like, who do you lose to? And there's a lot of teams in those conferences that have gotten used to being 7-5, 8-4, 9-3 on a consistent basis. Well, if they lose the 4 or 5 teams in conference that they can beat on a consistent year, like, all of a sudden you're going to go 2-10, and your fan base isn't going to be very happy. So I think they have to keep some of the minnows around just to conflate, who they've built their reputation into being. Like, so much of it is perception. And they have done a great job of marketing, and it just means more and all that kind of stuff. I think it's odd that this is happening as the sport is probably building more parity than it's had since the 90s with the transfer portal and the NIL. And I think that's why those two conferences are pushing for this expansion and pushing for the auto bid, is to kind of stop that and to quell that and to keep all the power that they've built over the last 30 or 40 years. Like, they don't want to give it back to the UTEPs of the world, much less the Texas Techs and Baylors and Iowa States of the world.
Yep, no question.
Mike, I mentioned it last week when the propaganda was released by the SEC. Going back 10 years makes no sense, considering that the first 7 of those 10 years, the rules were the exact opposite that they are now when it comes to roster building. So really, you need to look at the last 2 to 3 years, and then that's your metric. So telling me that 10 years ago this was what the S&P was doesn't really matter, because those factors that were not even being entertained at the time.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. Like, a Texas Tech couldn't do what they're doing right now. Like, you don't have to be the third string offensive tackle at Alabama anymore. Like, you can go start somewhere else and get paid and be seen. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that the SEC hasn't won the last couple of national championships as other people have started spending money. And I think revenue share is going to even that playing field out anymore. And they know that. Like, they're smart. Like, they see that. Like, in my neighborhood, we don't need rules to keep, like, multi-family houses from being built until they start being built, right? Like, and I think that the SEC and the Big Ten are starting to see kind of the movement and starting to see some other teams start building rosters and starting to compete. You've seen SMU. We talked about Texas Tech. And I think that they don't want that to happen. I think they're trying to solidify their place as the 2 power conferences in the country. And if they can get that, kind of codified into the rules, then, there's less for them to worry about on the outside, and they can get one step further or one step closer to kind of be in the AFC and the NFC, and they're doing the, kind of NFL diet thing. Maybe they take a couple of colleges that aren't a part of their conferences right now, but I just think that's the way it's going, and anything the Big 12 and the ACC can do to slow that down is probably good for the sport.
Mike, great stuff. Couple of great columns, but you always do that. Thanks for your time. We appreciate it. And you could tell your wife that 365 Sports feels like it would be a fun trip for you to get to L.A. to watch UTSA.
I appreciate that, guys. Sounds like we have a nanny, so I appreciate that.
There we go.
Look, I can make no promises. I do not speak for her, but
ever. Yeah. Thank you, Mike. Mike Craven with us. Dave Campbell's Texas Football Magazine, which